airport, she brings to a triumphant finish her 2,400-mile hop from Hawaii after 18 hours in the air. 10,000 cheer the end of the epical flight as the Lady Lindy slides into a perfect landing with 2 records. The first woman to fly the Pacific and the first person to fly it solo. She receives one of the most tumultuous greetings ever accorded a flyer.
1937 Cord. In a lot of cases, there are so many out there, they haven't really done much, because if you don't like the red one, there's a blue one. You can find another one.
Sure.
And I was looking for one. I told your mom about it. And I'm looking around and, well, this one's nice and this one's not bad. And we went over to a storage building.
Yes.
And your mom mentioned to me, she said, well, we have access to this Cord over here in the corner. And I looked at this Cord and I said, this is awful. I mean, this thing's a rust bucket. I mean, I don't even know if there were seats in the front of the car. I mean, it was...
I don't think there were.
And we looked at it, and your mom was like, well, you could have an opportunity to buy this car. And by the way, that box with all those bits and pieces goes with the car, and this box over here goes with the car, and all the stuff that's kind of crammed in the car goes with the car.
And there were seats back there.
In the
They
back.
went with the car.
Yeah. There weren't headlights in the car. I mean, it was multicolored.
Sure.
And then she said, well, this car was originally owned by Amelia Earhart. And she said, you familiar with that famous photograph of her, the car, and the Lockheed?
Yeah.
And I said, everybody knows that photograph. She said, well, we have the documentation. This was her car.
Yes.
And I did an OMG.
Yep.
I now fell in love with this car. So Ray Foster.
Correct.
I think he owned it for 30 years. Close to that. But Ray had gone out and done the research, and he was going to get this thing back to all matching numbers.
Yep.
The engine, the body, the chassis, the whole bit. And I think the transmission was in Texas or someplace like that. This car had ended up going to the wind. And as a lot of people know, if you had a 1935 car and in 1941 you blew the engine, you put a 41 engine in it because that was what's available.
Sure.
And you really weren't looking at the historical value of the car.
Sure.
You're just trying to get back on the road. And Ray, to his credit, found all the matching numbers of this car and had it all together.
Sure.
And I started talking to him, and it's like, so what do you want for the car? And he told me, I'm like, you're dreaming. We went back and forth, and it said, sell me the car and enjoy the journey with me, and we'll get this thing restored and get it back to its glory.
Yeah.
And the recognition. That starts the restoration, which is really where you guys come in.
The really cool thing about this car is the design and the execution of the car, and some of its faults are actually what has made this car possible today. The 810-812 Cord was a successor to Air 11 Cord's L29. The guy had a ton of ego. I mean, EL Cord was basically the Elon Musk of that era. I owned something on the order of like 200 companies at one point in time. And this car was interesting. So the L29 comes out, it's front wheel drive. It was fairly well received, but it had some weight distribution issues and whatnot. It was an elegant execution of front wheel drive at that point in time, but
The L29 is a small compartment for the driver.
it is very small.
Yeah, and it's tight.
Inline 8, turned around, the mounting of the transmission, everything that needed to be done to make that happen. They're a smaller car, for sure. So, no L29, no front wheel drive production for a couple of years. The 810 Cord comes out. They take it out to a show in California, basically, and it gets more or less rave reviews. EL Cord, being, the guy that he is like, yeah, we're going to build these. He's thinking they're going to build 1,000 cars a month. Well, they built a little over, I think it was like 1,100 cars in 36. Gordon Bierg pens the design on it. It's super unique. It integrates Stinson aircraft landing lights that were modified because EL Cord owned Stinson Aircraft, which, if memory serves, ended up kind of through acquisitions and whatnot, mergers, being United Airlines. It emphasized the aesthetics of airplane design. The interior has a lot of, airplane aesthetic ideas and concepts and flip switches and whatnot. Front-wheel drive, it used inspiration from the Citroën Traction Avant front-wheel drive to have the vacuum-driven shifting mechanism, which allowed the engine to be pushed out forward further and give better weight distribution. A lot of unique features of that car. Because of all the unique features, the weak issue in that car was the transmission. That's why they couldn't get the cars out faster. The 1,000 they thought they were going to make a month was the transmission. And that's what, in some way, well, in large part, preserved these cars with such a high survival rate. Because when Cord went out of business in 1937, their mechanics went elsewhere, right? All the people that worked on these cars and knew how to work on them. Well, they're a difficult car to set up and work on. So instead of them being driven, a lot of them were parked in a barn because they couldn't get the transmission working or the engine set up right or whatever that issue was. Well, that's exactly what happened with her car. She gets the car, like 9 months later, she disappears, right? Her husband, George Putnam, tries to have her declared dead through the state. Doesn't work the first go around, second go around it does. We have the records from the estate sale that show what the serial number of the car was, everything else. We know who it was sold to. The reason that he bought the car is he had another Cord that wasn't running. So he took the engine out of this car, out of the Amelia Earhart car, put it into his, ended up fixing the other engine, puts it back into the Amelia Earhart Cord. They both go separate ways. And thus begins Ray's lifetime quest of tracking all of this stuff back down. We have the records. He went through and talked to, related parties, people that were related to the owner that first bought it, records from the estate sale, records from the different states when cars were registered. It was a tremendous effort to bring this car back together, but it all was capable of being brought back together because of the inherent issues that those cars had originally.
And it's now back together.
It is very much back together. What's interesting, so going back to the pictures of her car when it was with the Electra at Purdue, and then back out at Lockheed, there's a scratch, an indentation in the fender that happened on the right-hand side of the car. When we went and inspected that fender, you could see the crease in the exact area. And it was a deep enough crease that it actually stretched the metal there. So putting these bits and pieces back together, there were attorneys involved in taking, statements on this and codifying all the information together. There was a tremendous amount of effort that went into vetting, validating, and documenting this car before the restoration even began.
So there are 3 items on this car that were additions that can go and be part of the judging, and they're worth 1 point each.
Correct.
That I understand.
Yes.
So one is the ashtray.
Yes.
One is the suicide knob on the steering wheel because people crash the car because they would unintentionally oversteer the car and then crash.
Or it would rip out of their hands because they had one hand on a knob and not on the wheel.
And then the third item, which is probably the most important, and how hard and difficult it was to find it, the compass.
Yes.
Which ties back into the aviation with her.
Yes. Well, and what's crazy is we know that she had all 3 of those accessories. You can see in the original photos very clearly the suicide knob and the compass. And we knew that she enjoyed a cigar. So she had the ashtray. And that was, of them all, the ashtray was the most common accessory to have, right? But the suicide knob is a little bit more difficult to find. The correct compass was
insane.
Remarkably. There were ACD guys that had been doing this for 40, 50 years that said they've never actually seen one in person. So to be able to source all that back together, to put it into the exact specification that it was when she had the car, was a tremendous undertaking. We worked with the ACD Museum. We looked at original paint samples, original leather samples they had, because the car we knew was, through records, Palm Beach tan with a rich maroon interior, which was a fairly popular color combination. It's one of those colors that works on that car and would not work on almost anything else. But it works.
It's a gorgeous color.
Beautifully. But the amount of effort that went into, because of the historical significance of the ownership, to bring that car to that. Cord used extensive cadmium plating in the engine bay, right? We worked with 2 different companies to do the cadmium plating on these cars to get the right finishes depending on the part. The upholstery work that was done, getting the correctly matched and dyed leather for this was an undertaking. We went through multiple iterations of paint colors to get what we felt to be the closest match to what Palm Beach tan was in period. There was so much work that went into that car from because of the historical importance. And obviously, we approach every car with a very high level of research, but this car was so wild.
Forensic research.
Yes, forensic, neurotic, crazy research. But this car had so much significance culturally and historically that it
still does.
It does. But it created it was almost, you felt, when the car was in the shop, it had a different aura around the business of the historical significance of kind of bringing her story back into the fold, because at that point in time, there was another outfit that thought they had maybe identified her plane off the Marshall Islands. And I know we were all joking that, God, how amazing would it be if they found a prop that we could take to Pebble Beach that year. But there was a significance about that car around Levine Restorations that made an air of just the presence of historical significance in a way that's unique for that car. The coolest part about this whole thing is your approach to this. Let's make it right, historically, accurately, technically.
This car also made it on the lawn between the Capitol and the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. last year.
Yes.
Under plexiglass.
Yep.
Armed guard for 24 hours a day for a week straight.
Yes, the 33rd car inducted into the National Historic Vehicle Register.
Which is huge.
It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable. It was the honor of a lifetime to have that car down there. Well, do you remember Ray when he saw that?
Ray.
He was in tears.
He wept. I don't mean to state this lightly, but I think a lot of owners would buy a car from somebody and then not really give that person the recognition, or not really give them the spotlight to shine on their participation to bring that car historically to today.
Yeah.
And you're right. That's why I looked at Ray and said, here, Ray, you need to get an interview.
Yep.
You need to get you documented on the 30 years of your life that you spent traveling and finding and collecting the engine and the body and getting this all together to the point where all the bits and pieces are together in one room.
Yeah.
Now we can start the restoration.
Yeah.
Because you could have started the restoration and said, we got it all restored, but it's not the original engine.
Sure.
In this case, it is the original engine with the original matching numbers.
Yep.
And Ray is really a tribute to that.
You have allowed a lot of people to have their role in this car and other cars in here, right? Which is what these cars were originally built for, right? They were shared. They were modes of transportation. People were using them to get to and from, and they touched a ton of different lives. They facilitated different facets of livelihood for people and what they were doing it with their time.
Most people, and it doesn't matter what their income is, what their job is in life, what their profession is, everybody likes a car.
Sure.
Everybody loves the automobile.
Yeah.
And they'll talk about it.
Yep.
Car's got a story. It comes to life.
Jack, as always, thank you for making this story come to life, for giving us the opportunity to bring the car to life and just what you're doing with it. It's incredible.
It's a group effort, and we got a great relationship, and it's the owner and the restoration company.
Roses to Amelia and the plaudits of the world to a veteran of flights that have shown the way for aviation's progress. It's her most brilliant chapter in a 16-year aviation career.